Welcome to the Sanctuary Podcast, hosted by Angell Deer. In this podcast, we explore the mysteries of spirituality and consciousness. In each episode, we dive deep into the realms of human experiences, our rapidly changing world, and the unseen realms, tapping into the universal wisdom that connects us all. Whether you're a seasoned spiritual seeker, starting to awaken to the possibilities of a more expansive reality, or want support on your journey, this podcast is for you. Join me as we explore topics such as shamanism, spiritual transformation, holistic healing, the medicine path, energy healing, plant medicine, ancient wisdom, and more. Our guests are respected elders and experts in their fields, and we'll learn from their insights and experiences as we journey together on the path of spiritual growth. If you can, please consider supporting this podcast by joining our Patreon page at patreon.com/thesanctuaryny. Once again, it is patreon.com/thesanctuaryny. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
Thank you for joining me today on this new episode, and I'm really excited to share with you this conversation with Dr. Bayo Akomolafe. I've met Bayo through his conferences and his writing a couple of years ago, and I was immediately hooked. There is a way that Bayo talks about the issue we face in the world and how we relate with a more than human world. How do we go through those time of great challenges that we are facing? Bayo just bring a whole different view on those. And I think with his poetic tone and his philosophical approach and his deeply grounded wisdom, you're up for a treat. So you can read more about Bayo details under this podcast or this video, but let me tell you a little bit more about him. Bayo Akomolafe is a widely celebrated international speaker. He's a post-humanist thinker, a poet, a teacher, an intellectual, an essayist, and the authors of 2 books. The first book is These Wilds Beyond Our Fences, Letters to My Daughter on Humanity's Search for Home. And his second book is We Will Tell Our Own Story, The Lions of Africa Speak. Bayo is also the founder of the Emergence Network, a planet-wide initiative that seeks to convene communities in new ways in response to the critical civilizational challenges we face as a species. He's the host of the post-activist course festival event We Will Dance with Mountain. And he's been lecturing in different universities. He's appointed as the inaugural Global Senior Fellow of the University of California, Berkeley, and he has many other beautiful talent under his hood. So let's get going. I hope you have an amazing time with Bayo, and thank you again so much for listening to us today. Please, if you feel called, I remind you that you can go on our Patreon page on patreon.com/thesanctuaryny and give us a very small donation every month, but that makes a huge difference in my capacity to bring you incredible speakers and quality recordings. So thank you so much for all of you that are already doing that. And please, if you felt like this podcast or this YouTube channel has helped you, I would really appreciate your support there. Okay, let's start with Bayo now. Thank you. Bayo, it's really a pleasure to be with you today. Yes. So where are you right now? Tell me a bit where you are. Tell me about the place.
I'm at home with my people in Chennai, India. Chennai, the south of India, in Tamil Nadu. And yeah, that's where I call home.
Mm.
Now, I'm in the warm embrace of my children, my family, which is what I've craved for a long time now. I've been on the road. It feels very nice
Mm.
to be in their vicinity.
Mm. Tell me about a little bit about the land there, because I have not visited. I'm guessing some people here, and more about your relationship to that land.
Mm.
No, I often
I,
feel for me lands connect me to voices and connect me to a certain vibration. And what is that connection for you? What is that relation? What does it brings for you there?
There are a couple of ways that I can answer that. The first one is to acknowledge that I don't really think I have a relationship with land here. And this is what I mean by that. That there is a sense in which the vocation of progress and development has swallowed up the city where I stay in. And Chennai is a very concrete place. It's very concrete. It proliferates real estate projects. There are many everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, through the city is this metro project. They're trying to connect vast distances with this huge train network underground. There's a place that I loved to visit, and we're hoping to build our home there, called Madavaram. It has beautiful, it's called the Milk Colony in Madavaram, and it has beautiful trees and foliage, and the air is just wonderful there.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually felt this is the place. This is the place my son, who is autistic, could use some clean air. Mm. But Madavaram, snaking through that place now, is now this huge excavatory project. So I haven't, because my work is I'm highly itinerant and constantly traveling. Something in me is quite reticent and shy about claiming intimacy with the land. But then the second way I answer and respond to this question here is, what is land? Is it the topos where humans act? Is it just the soil beneath our feet? Or is it just what we plant seed in and grow food from? Could land be relationships? Could land be the vortices of voices, instigations, agencies, hospitalities that involves not just the soil, but the bodies that depend on the soil? Where does land stop or begin, and where does it stop? Does it stop at the surface level, at geographical or geological formations? Or is it, given that we're contingent upon land, whatever forms it takes, does it also mean our bodies? Does it also mean the ways that we traverse technologies? In that way, then, querying how we define land and opening it up for some post-humanist intervention, I would say that I'm deeply embedded here. Land is the hospitality of the people of Chennai, the community that we're so privileged to be part of. The people who knock on our doors at 6 a.m. and ring the bell, and sometimes it gets annoying, but you're standing there with milk. Here's milk for your day. That's land, right? It's not entirely humanist, but the sense of hospitality cannot be fully or exclusively humanist. And I will connect that to land as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think you've been called a post-humanist animist. I don't know if you coined the term or if people coined it for you, or even if you like it.
I didn't coin the term post-humanist. But yes, I often throw those words together. often, to show people that I'm really smart.
So what does it mean for you? What does it bring to you? There's a lot of terms there. There's 3 terms: post-humanist, animist. Do you feel that it's a call? It's something that is in the collective that is being called? Or is it a way to maybe be present with what is happening in our world today?
It's an interruption of presence. Presence and belonging and commonality and subjectivity have long been framed within the meandering ideologies of liberal humanism, white modernity. We think in terms of separate selves. Now, these are the sticky habits of thought that have largely influenced our public order. We think in terms of Angel is a self. Angel has will. Angel has choice. Angel has an interiority that allows him to have private thoughts and experiences. Angel is a self, an Aristotelian, dissociated, isolated, separate, inseparable self, right? And the morality of the structural morality, the tensility of that formation, I think, is experiencing a crisis. It has never been all by itself, but it seems to be the case these days that it's very difficult, brother, to think about ourselves that way, right? It's not just pandemics and AI, right? AI is now challenging professors to re-examine how they give assignments to students, right? What does it mean to give an assignment in the era of ChatGPT, right? What is consciousness if we are already anxious about, robots taking over our jobs, right? Who has consciousness? So the humanist, faces a challenge, and that challenge is the centrality of the human. Post-humanism is not new. In many ways, it is new, and in many senses, it is ancient. It is it's not one thing. It's a field of conversations and inquiry and speculations that refuse generally to centralize human beings as complete, as independent, right? Instead of thinking about the world by starting with the individual, we start with everything else. What made Angel decide to take coffee today? Well, Angel decided it. That's one way to think about that. Another way to think about that is to stretch the genetics into epigenetics, to stretch choice into patterns and algorithms, to stretch identity into ontofugitivity, to stretch presence into virtuality and diasporic natures, to refuse to start from the individual, because it seems like the world, which we once thought of as a stage, is now an actor.
It's interesting what you say about the coffee or the plant.
You took coffee.
No, because I think the coffee is calling me. It's not me that wants the coffee. I think the coffee as a plant.
Coffee wants you.
I often feel like I take care of a really big land here, and we grow food and we do community events. And I'm asked often, I write a lot about my relationship to lands and to plants, but my very surface understanding, I don't pretend to have a deep understanding, but what I'm feeling is that the plants are farming me, that the plants are calling me, that they have, in a very, very wise way, wiser than I can ever be so far, find a way that I will take care of them, that I will, make them a nice home, that I will entertain this dream that the plants have about their world.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow I'm participating in it. And yes, I'm in the same way that I believe they have mastered the bees and the pollinators to come to them and to control their habits, because they can really move around. They've done the same with us. And some plant have been very good at it. I think coffee is one of them. She has mastered the way to spread across the world.
Yes, like apples.
By
like
using us, right?
Michael Pollan will speak about apples as apples, and I wrote a short story inspired by that. And maybe apples are a dominant plant species, fruits, right? Because they've learned how to deal with humans. They made their flesh sweet. And so they've traveled into our stories, into our creation myth, into every corner of the world, so to speak. They're successful because they know how to tame humans. Right?
I like that.
Different. Yeah.
So I want to wave on those ideas of individuality and disconnection and the isolation that we kind of put ourselves into by doing this anthropocentric view of the world and build the world around it.
Yes.
And the animist way, and that sees the world as alive. Every beings, every stone are sentient as communities of belonging.
Yeah.
And we are seeing that, more and more at display. And for me, I believe it's one of the big reasons of suffering, or the constant reproduction of suffering, the feeling of the suffering, this idea of the separation of the bodies, of the body between the land, a bit what you were sharing about before, but also with everything else that we intertwine with. And even, we are asked often to take a stand, to take a side, to have an opinion. And I think even that opinion is very deeply weaved into that sense of separation somehow.
Yeah, brother. Yes, indeed. And I've been speaking about solidarity and how solidarity can become a form of biopolitical control, right? So, solidarity as a means to continuity is a troubling and ironic prospect. But you ask about the individual, and I think we're linking this up with agency and solidarity. I was at a place today with my wife. We're traveling and we're going to update our passports. And we're in a line. The line was a very, very strange line.
It's an India line. I've been in India a lot.
No,
it's not funny.
Here's what's funny, brother. It wasn't an Indian line. It was an American line.
Okay.
It was an American line at the American embassy, and in just one tiny corner of the room, they successfully created a maze of ropes. I'm always forgetting the name of those things, that you click and in the airport and then you pass through and, whatever the name is, folks, whoever is listening to this, they had successfully created a maze in a tiny corner of the room where they successfully managed a large group of people. So imagine just in a corner of your beautiful space there, just one corner, there are 100 people in different aspects of, different positionality. And they're just standing, like this. And the orientation of this space is such that it's so densely packed, but so intricately woven that they successfully managed them there. And I was just thinking about, everyone was quiet, as you should be when you're applying for a visa to the United States. Everyone was very, very quiet. And I just told my wife, who was in front of me, I said, if we took out all these lines, if I could just make it vanish with a Thanos snap, not a slap, but a snap, if I could make it disappear, we would suddenly notice how awkward this entire arrangement is. We will suddenly be standing and the dividers will not be there, and we won't exactly know how to orient ourselves, right? So I started to speak to her about how, bodies are, and behavior is ecological, right? We are constantly, we don't act in isolation. We act with the world. We act with furniture. The chairs you and I are sitting on, I assume you're sitting on a chair and not doing a powerful kick-ass squat. I assume you're positioned on a chair. If I find out you've been squatting all this while, I would really feel, ashamed of myself for sitting on a chair. But I assume you're sitting on a chair. The chairs we're sitting on is positioning our bodies in a particular way, making certain thoughts accessible, making certain ways of speaking accessible, so that you're not Angel on a chair. You are Angel hyphen chair hyphen coffee I had or did not have this morning hyphen microbial, there you go, microbial entities in your gut hyphen the weather, hyphen so many things. You're a hyphenation of these things. So when we speak about individuals, we're not speaking about atoms or isolated things. We are contesting the cartographies of specific kinds of relations. The human individual is not the stable self. The human individual is a dance with the planet, a certain way of dancing. Separation is a form of performance. When we think we're separated, we're actually performing a turning away from entanglement, right? So the individual is a cartography, is what I'm trying to say here. The individual is a cartography, and is a cartography and a network of other relations. So that the question here for us is not how do we get rid of the individual? It is how do we break out of this cartography? How do we listen to other directions? How do we lose our way? Now, losing your way becomes emancipatory, right? How do I break out of this embassy line that just positions us in this very, very strange forms? How do we break out of it? And that feels consequential to ask, I think.
Feels like we have to get in trouble, or there will be a moment of trouble when we break that up. There will be a moment of if that was to disappear instantly, all the borders and all those limitations, it will be very disorienting moments, right? Because we don't have the structured orientations that have been given to us or taught to us.
But let me just add another example that's swimming in my head now. Because I travel too much, I have had the privilege of watching how people behave when planes land, right? I don't know, like when the plane is coasting or just going down the tarmac and going to the parking area and to the gates. We get the announcement, please stay seated until the plane comes to a complete stop. And the seatbelt sign is off. We keep on getting those warnings. They work in the United States. They work. Every time I fly locally in the United States, people are seated. No one gets up. In India, it's a different thing. Sometimes while the plane is still going down, some guy is up and he's already checking he's ready, and then please sit down. The force with which sit down is said, often leads to success, or someone else down the line is already getting up, inspired by the heroic gesture of passenger 9E. which is my way of saying, I'm not trying to say one is less developed than the other. No, I'm trying to say certain ways of behaving, depend on, or behavior depends on context and technologies and arrangements. They get up in India, I guess, because the concept of a line isn't very strong here, right? The concept of a line is stronger. The concept of a crowd is stronger in India, I see. These are preliminary assessments, but it seems staying on a line is a difficult concept or proposition. Bodies are more oriented to crowds, and time works differently here. It's a different kind of intelligence. In Chennai, the traffic lights are suggestions. They are not warnings or instructions. They're like, what do you think? Like, people are just going, but I've not experienced road rage in Chennai. But there are laws in the US grounded over decades, hardly ever formulated or reformulated traffic laws, beautiful roads, stable traffic lights and regulations, and lots of road rage. So I'm trying to say there's a different intelligence here. And that intelligence is a post-humanist quality, not a human quality.
And in that context, and liberalism, capitalism can only thrive through all those roles, and also the separation of bodies, the individuality, right? If there's no you and me, or me and that, the idea of liberalism and capitalism has a very hard time to function without that transactional possibility, monetary possibility, operation possibility, control possibility, right? Can we talk a little bit about that, liberalism, capitalism, and their entanglement around the separation of bodies, and how you see them playing even today in the world?
Right. I speak about, the flattening, the clearing of the wilds, to make room for the mastery of the self, right? The colonial project of white modernity is not, many would say that that's a different concept from capitalism, and that's a different concept from modernity, and that's a different concept from the racialized category of whiteness. And yet there is a way we can read them together. Extractive capitalism with colonization and coloniality, which are two different concepts as well, and with modernity and white modernity for that instance. It seems to create this diffractive space where we notice how worlds are flattened and cleared to make room for the idea of a stable self. This is what I think whiteness does. It's the map making, sense making that depends on the sterilization of ecology so that it can give birth again and again to the lionization and the reification of the subject, the human subject. In order to do that, we need to delimit the agency of tomatoes and apples. We cannot speak about consciousness, except we associate consciousness with big-brained mammals, right? So we kind of, even the way we allot and designate things like artificial intelligence, there's some hubristic element there. Like, we are the natural intelligence, you see. We've got this thing down pat. Pixels and computer screens are only epiphenomena. They come from us, so they're artificial. But in what ways is nature artifice? In what way is nature not natural? In what way is the artificial natural? In what way is it possible to say that the world is keenly intelligent and agential, and consciousness doesn't require a self, a stable self, a human self, to be conscious? right? So capitalism seems to be the productivization of relations, right? The productivization of relations, a materiality of care that is dependent on the sterilization of the planet, right? I'm saying that the relations we have, which often become monetary and transactional, and think about the world as dead, mute, and lacking agency until the human comes in to arrange everything together, which obscures the ways that we are arranged by the world that we seek to arrange, right? Like you said, I'm not farming, I'm being farmed, right? That seems to establish capitalist relations, or at the heart of capitalist relations. And of course, that jives with the ways that the citizen, and I often speak about the citizen as more than just the citizen subject. The citizen is the condition for the citizen subject. The citizen is a territory of acting, right? And this territory comprises of citizen subjects and their prosthetic others, right? By prosthetic others, I mean white modernity is proliferated by the proposition that white bodies are supreme, that they're typical, right? And black bodies, brown bodies, all other kinds of bodies are on the way, if they ever arrive, to this typicality. They're on the way, right? And even if we don't subscribe to that, we are all dependent on, and coterminous with these practices, these ideological, political, epistemological, cosmological practices. We are all using phones now that have resources mined in Congo. Extractive capitalism, right? You might protest capitalism and use your phone for days to do so. So it's not dependent on choice or intention. It's that we are all imbricated in webs of suffering, and we all participate in these realities that we're trying to deny or get rid of. So that in a sense we are webs, not isolated particles. We are wave-like qualities that that queers the ways we approach change, agency, and accountability.
So it seems that, I've been reflecting a lot on that, this colonial project. And there are two ideas that are really interesting. That on one side is that there is this hyper-individualistic world that we are in.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the capitalistic colonial project is very much about uniformity. You have to fit into, right? And if your body is different, if your brain is different, if your ways are different, you're excluded, or you're changed, or you're framed and formed, at best, or it can be extremely violent. In fact, what can be done to you if you do not fit into the uniformity of thinking, of looking, of being, of talking, right? And at the same time, there is this fake idea that there is freedom, individuality in liberalism, that we are free and we can be wherever I want, in this world. Is that even privileged to even think that way and not realize that this is not happening? And that's things that I want to weave into. It feels often to me that even decolonization can be as violent, in fact, can be a colonial way to look at colonialism. Like there is those ways that we approach the system that in fact are so embedded in the way of the system. And I just keep repeating the crisis, the problem.
Yes, brother. It's I just want to say this, that diversity could become a form of uniformity. It's we often think of uniformity in terms of resemblance, right? So it's uniform if it appears to us in a particular way. But uniformity could take less uniform appearances. You could have diversity, and the diversity is producing the same effects as uniformity, right? In fact, probably even greater reinforcements. Of course, this is a way of also bracketing the ways we construct our language around racial diversity and other things, right? You could do some farming, and I'm sure you know a lot about monocropping than I do. And then there is the converse, or the opposite, if you will, which is to plant many crops instead of just the one, right? That's richer, right? It feeds the soil, it nourishes. And yet, if my monocropping leads to creating products that go into sacks and are shipped out to some factory or something, or some shopping mall, and the new diverse ecologies I produce are also shipped into bags and shopping malls, then it matters little, because of the instrumentalization of that diversity. It's been taken, and the form of it is not producing merely different kinds of appearances. It's producing and reproducing certain kinds of realities. And that's where diversity can be uniform, right? You can have uniform diversity and diverse uniformity, right? Yeah, I'm not even sure where I was going with that, but I heard that, and I just wanted to pause with that and tease out something that I was sensing about, the ways we speak about diversity. Because, brother, I think diversity is becoming less scandalous. We've had Obama in the White House in the US. We have Kamala Harris now. It's becoming more tolerable to think about minorities in the White House. Of course, what that does is that it sometimes obscures that there is a red button and there are nuclear codes, and it matters little what pigmentation is the finger that presses the red button that blasts an entire country. So while we celebrate diversity, I think it's also possible to notice that it's limited. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was, following on what you're saying about the crops, or even the political system, right? Does it really matter if at the end it serves the same agenda? It makes us feel better thinking,
Yes,
it's like in corporation now, there are diversity program,
equity and inclusion. Yes, DEI.
It's makeup, right? Or we're providing now in companies, corporation. I was looking, there's also those mental health program and things that are designed for women so they can do breastfeeding and have their kids there and all of that. But it's all in service of the machine. Same machine, but the machine looks sexy, right? The machine looks like, oh yeah, change is happening, but does it? Does it?
Yeah.
When we look at the crisis that has happened since October 7, another crisis on top of the other crisis, right? And we see how the world is reacting, right, to the crisis. And now, to me, it feels very often that there is a certain level of insanity happening in the world, meaning that we don't take a breath, we don't pause. Like before we started here, I say, hey, do you want 5 minutes? Let's take time, right? So let's take a breath. Let's reconnect with our bodies. Let's feel before we think and act. And I feel we are right now in this moment where we can almost see the unfolding of the monster, but nobody wants to get to know the monster. We just either, feed the monsters or are afraid of the monsters, but there is not this desire to really have a heart-to-heart conversation with it. Right? It's like I'm going to call mom and dad because there's a monster under my bed, so they're going to come and turn the light on, right? But I'm not going to take the time. Maybe let's go under the bed. Let's see. Let's look at him in the eyes or her in the eyes. What does she needs? What does she wants? What's her purpose here, right? Can we talk a little bit about that crisis we are in and a way through that? I don't know if there is one way or many ways through that, but I feel it's been very polarized, like every single issues in this world today. We are asked to choose and to have a way, and that create polarization. And at the same time, we don't address what is going on underlying it, which is ancient, which has been here for a very long time. That started, all those wars we have been in, right? It's like a crisis for attention. It's calling us. It's painful. It's hurtful, And yet we respond to the pain with more pain, or we respond to the crisis by adding an amplification of the ramification of what that means for our humanity, our connection with each other's. And I know many people feel either very sided or polarized, or very disconnected because they feel this is not the way and I don't want to be part of that, right? Those are very extreme reaction, which, we can understand in a system where the bodies are tired and overreacted and not properly nourished on so many levels. How do we find the ground here? How do we find the other way, the other ways, right?
That's a beautiful question to consider. How do we find a way? And another secondary question would be, is there one way or multiple ways? My question would dance with the complexity of even thinking about ways as predetermined solutions, waiting for discovery. I would say that there isn't a way or even multiple ways. It's not one and the many. It's the indeterminacy and the continuous entrainment of possibilities that we're in and we inhabit, right? It's like the ocean. It's like traversing the ocean. There isn't a way or multiple ways through the ocean, right? The ocean is constantly this undulating field that resists cartography and yet is the condition for cartography, right? It's nautical and yet anautical. It's stormy, the tides, the storms, the tensions, the lightning, all of that are not exactly promising for travel, and yet it provides room for that. So it's not one or the other, it's the indeterminacy of ways. And what that brings me to with that scaffolding is to notice how we often get trapped in the presumption of a stable ideological current that runs from where we are to where we think we want to be, right? And in doing that, in thinking about this linearity, we perform agency as if we had it. We are the change agents. We just need to update our to-do lists every morning. We just need to enter into ourselves more, and then we can solve our problems. Then we start to get exhausted. I feel that we need to be carried away, brother. Yeah, it's not even us finding the way, which which seems to maybe reify the positionality of the and the mastery of the citizen subject. It's not even about us wayfinding. It seems to be about us being spirited away, like being carried away in the ways that Black bodies were carried away, right? They didn't choose to undertake those journeys of oppression. They didn't choose to do that. And yet something about being carried away, something about being syncopated, something about the downbeat disturbing the tendency of the neurotypical, or the upbeat disturbing the neurotypical downbeat, something about the breaking in of new tendencies and new questions and new tensions and fields allows me to decenter the human as the place and site of change, right? The human is not all we're cracked up to be, and yet we're dependent on cracks for how novelty happens, right? Yeah, I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, thank you for that. I could feel it in my bones as you were describing it. But how do we answer the call for justice, for hope? How do we bring that? And in the animist tradition I work with, studied for so long, they decided to really surrender and into the not knowing, into what we call the great mystery, into something that is so much bigger than ourselves, And at the same time, there is from this place of non-duality that contains duality, that is beyond. There's also the rituals and the ceremonies and the actions, what I would say justice in some ways, that the try to have some organization, some sense of directions, some sanity in the insanity, some kind of light in that storm, right? Like the crossing the ocean you were mentioning, you kind of need your North Star or your compass. You need a good instrument, however big is the storm, right? And what is that today in that context, even of that conflict? What do we use as compass here? So we return home. So we return to belonging. So we return with land, with each other's, with the greater collective beyond the humans, because it's not just human suffering here. It's so beyond that.
This might come as a shock then. When I say belonging is in crisis, I mean to say that belonging is not an ideal that is outside of material performances, the co-enactments and cohabitations and co-inquiry of viruses and humans and ancestries and bacteria and geographies and tomatoes. I don't know why I keep on speaking about tomatoes, but yeah, there's no outside here. So I often think about justice as very material. It's made of very substantial, stretchy, relations. It's not beyond, it's not Archimedean, it's not transcendent. It's very, very embedded in different material conditions, the conditions of the public order. And because it's embedded, because it's down to earth, it is troubled. And because it's troubled, it can reproduce specific kinds of worlds and natures and creativities, right? I had a debate. It wasn't intended as a debate. I was in Italy, and I was at the University of Turin. And I had a conversation with a class about solidarity. what does solidarity mean in a time of Palestinian suffering and the epigenetics of Israeli trauma in its quest for home within the global nation-state order, right? What does it mean when a people have eaten the Holocaust as a bitter meal and haven't learned yet to spit it out or don't know how? And it lingers, the taste of it. And the taste of it enacts the quest for new technologies so that the taste never happens. So we toil and we turn over the soil so that we can grow sweet things. But to grow sweet things, we need to break the backs of others. So the cycle of violence as a ricochet, not as merely the actions of individuals. It becomes this organic territory, ricocheting across the room. So what does it mean to address, not to refrain from designating the perpetrator and the victim so confidently that we're sure where lines dwell? What does it mean to do that? So I'm struggling with, I was having this conversation with him, and the notion of solidarity came up. And I was saying solidarity is still and can still be a form of biopolitical control, right? That individuals can still be sustained by how we gain solidarity. And a professor there was so taken by that, and he raised his voice immediately and he said, it was actually my host, and he said, no, solidarity is the collective, it's the collective. So we shouldn't really think about solidarity as individuals, right? And I said to him in response that I don't think the individual is a separate quality from collective. Collectivity can still be a performance of individuality, right? Just because there are many doesn't mean it's leading to different effects, right? Just like I said about diversity being a form of uniformity. So, yes, I'm not sure where I was going with this, but the idea of solidarity that I'm trying to invite today is what I call sensuous solidarity, a sideways gesture, a moving away from the frontal assault of modern subjectivity and the neurotypicality of solutions, and then seeking, the whiff of a scent of a new direction. Yeah, something like that.
So I want to, to me, it often feel like one of my teacher, was to say to me a few months ago when we were talking about the subject, he said, well, we are in a very big ceremony right now. Ceremony of this arch where there is the entering of ceremony and there is the kind of dissociation, the self is not really present, and there is the collective, and then there is the kind of the peak of the experience, the remembering of the what we call the original instructions that the trees still carry, the bees still carry, right? And we're trying to remember those instructions. And then there is purging, there is bleeding, there is screaming, there is tears, and then there is a deeper connection that happened in this moment of grief, a deeper connection in this part of the ceremony. And it feels to me very much like we are in this global ceremony, but we never get to that place of collective grieving, that place of really holding. We know the troubles, we know the things that are heavy in our hearts, but there is really not a space for those waters to really flow. There is always control of those waters on so many levels. And in
in the cosmology. In that cosmology, they say if those waters can really find their way, if you control the waters, you're always going to have troubled waters, confused waters. They're never going to get clear. They never find their freedom. They never find their way. And we've controlled the waters in so many ways. We put them in pipe and we put dams on rivers, and it's kind of a reflection of our own inner waters and what we're doing with them. I'm saying that because I feel sometimes the only thing I want is, in fact, I don't want to have an argument or a different opinion. I just want to cry together. I just want to hug and cry in our difference of opinion, maybe. And maybe we stand for this and we stand for that, but I know we want to cry together because I know we both feeling grief, and I feel that would be the connecting link.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted, kind of see what that stir for you, this idea, as I watch it and as I feel it, I was like, oh, we never really cried for what happened on so many lands,
mm-hmm.
including the United States.
Mm-hmm.
This country has been at war since its creation. And there is never a moment of grieving because there's this idea of constant progress and developments, and we literally have no time for that. There is no value on recognizing that. And then the bitter pill, the bitter medicine is still there and is still creating harm on the brown bodies, on all those things. Yeah, maybe slavery is gone, but spend some time in the field in California that are growing organic green food, and it's all brown bodies, Mexican, that are growing that food in this idea of modernity, right? Because we haven't really processed that. And the lands still carry the poison and the bodies and the minds. And it's happening today, not just in the Middle East, right? It's happening here in America on reservations. It's, I spent a lot of time on reservation. It's more than heartbreaking. But there's no space for that grief. There's not much space for this part of the ceremony. We probably don't even have rituals or elders that knows how to do that. That should be our presidents, our leaders, right? That would be the one in the tribe, in the community that say, hey, we have a ritual for this. We have a ceremony for this. And this is important. But here we are on this linear time, right? Across. Yeah. And we just can't really finish the cycle.
Yeah.
What do you feel about this? What's coming up for you as I share that? And what's your relation to that, I would say, your understanding of that in this moment of time, and also because of who you are, where you come from, and what you've seen?
Well, brother, thank you. I've been speaking about this for years, the idea of grief not having a place. Me being a clinical psychologist in training, and in my book, These Walls Beyond Our Fences, I explored grief not having a place. Recently, I held this conversation with a Jewish sister and a Palestinian brother about grief as a nomadic marker of loss, that grief is the cartography of loss. And grief is not just crying or shedding tears. Grief is mutiny that interrupts the stability of the rectilinear self, right? That's what grief is. Grief is not just shedding tears. It's a form of mutiny. So I've been speaking about this for some time, and I feel we need more spaces of a shared grieving together as a form of responsibility, right? The future has a strong distaste for grieving, right? The future is this vehicular, constant quest for the not here. And that's how progress happens. It's the turning away from eldering to the promissory note and prophecy of, the vaunted youthfulness that will eventually save the world. But grieving is a form of time travel, right? It's a way of some aspect of the world telling itself that I'm not done yet. This body is not done yet. Don't just rush to the next thing. There's something here that you might want to pay attention to. There's something here that you want to be, that's carrying you away. And you want to, it seems like the intelligence to mark out that thing, that errant thing that is heading in a different direction when the plane is rushing down the tarmac. It seems we have no space for it, for that kind of intelligence. But that intelligence that knows how to mark it and has space for that kind of movement accesses and creates the world differently. It creates the world differently. It's not better than modernity. I'm very, very hesitant to say indigeneity is better than modernity. Where do I stand to be able to say such things? You cannot stand outside the world, to move it. We have to stand with the world. So I don't know how to make those measurements. Modernity is a form of moral creativity. It will give us toilets and Elon Musk and Twitter and rocket ships. It will give us computer screens and Apple Vision Pro. It gives us lots of stuff, not exclusively by itself, since modernity is also a reading and a speculative one at that. And other forms of social arrangements, socio-material arrangements, create the world differently, and also not without trouble. It's not like the reason why I understand and I have great compassion alongside those moral arrangements that seek to return to the way things were. But my intellectual commitments and finite energies are given to the idea that even originality is a destination for something else, right? There isn't a stable source. The world is too experimental and open-ended to have stable images. If we were to return to some idea of the way things were, we would be performing something new, right? So original instructions are always new, in a sense. Original instructions are always copies of some kind. Yeah,
they're alive. They're constantly emerging, right? And they emerge from that moment. It's something alive. We cannot fix it in time or space.
Indeed, brother. Indeed.
So we are coming to the end here,
yes,
brother, and I know it's also late for you.
Beautiful.
I just want to ask you, like a more personal question. I guess all that was also personal in some way, but what is your ritual, your ceremony, your ways to stay human, to stay sane, or to stay insane and human in that insanity, the world we're in? Do you have, and maybe, it's just your being with your family and your children, as you were sharing earlier, but what is your go-to that works for you really well for any moments of crisis?
Hmm. When I was an undergrad in the university, I was a strange kind of nerd. I didn't have company. I didn't really have friends. I would go from the library to the cafeteria to the classroom to the library to the cafeteria to the classroom. That some people who observed me, faculty and students alike, called me TMC. They called me TMC because that stood for Total Man Concept. And Total Man Concept was an elective offered by this Christian university. And its key proposition was the perfect man is possible. Right? We can make a perfect man. There are rules for doing that and principles for doing that. And if we follow the right principles, we can create a Christian hero who is perfect, righteous, and great, like Mandela. So Total Man Concept was the disciplinarity for creating great men and sometimes great women, but primarily great men.
Great man.
Great men. And so they called me TMC. TMC. That's what they called me that because I was odd. I was odd. In retrospect, it was such an impoverished way of moving through the world. But it was my minor gesture, you see. It was my idiosyncratic marking of territory. It was a way of shielding myself from the impulses and imperatives of meeting others, where I just wanted to write poetry and experience new thinking beyond passing and getting good grades. Sometimes I'll walk down the field and there on either side of me, there'll be people making out. Well, not quite, but on the verge of making out. It was a Christian university. You know, there would be people, couples, boyfriend and girlfriend, just close intimately with each other. And you know, something in me longed for that, but also celebrated the fact that I was this alien kid. I don't know why I'm sharing all of this, but it goes to what I'm trying to say here. That on some of those nights, I really was attracted to the alien, to the odd. The odd became celebratory, like a ritual of some sort. Like I was participating in something that few had access to. I would look at the moon, often bright on those nights when I walked back from the library, and I would contemplate how the Earth was this rogue planet. It's not classified as a rogue planet since it's caught in the orbit of the sun, but I would contemplate the Earth as this fugitive in space, and that I was actually on this rock that was hurling or being hurled by something through space. It was just something about that, something about leaning into the alien was very comforting for me. So when you ask me about my rituals, brother, I immediately come to the alien. There's this famous quote, "Nothing human is alien to me." I have something of a reverse, that everything alien feels welcome to me. I'm constantly wanting to move into the alien, the surprising. So whatever comes from that impulse to write, to think, to play with my son, to listen to him, to hold back my tendency to want to create, to want to gentrify him, and to actually engage him, to listen to how he's navigating the world, that feels so important to me and to my politics, which I often brand an autistic politics. So yes, that's my spirituality.
Beautiful. Thank you, brother. Thank you for this time today. I know it's late and I know you have a busy day, so I deeply appreciate the time we spent here weaving a little bit. And I know the conversation will reach many hearts. Wishing you a really good night, and yeah, much blessing. Enjoy home. Don't travel too much. It's nice to be home. Enjoy this time on the earth. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, brother. Blessings to you.
You too, brother.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Sanctuary Podcast. We deeply value your support. please consider sharing this podcast with others and joining our Patreon page at patreon.com/thesanctuaryny. Once again, it is patreon.com/thesanctuaryny. At The Sanctuary, we believe that spirituality is a personal journey that takes many forms, and we honor and respect all paths to awakening and the rise of consciousness. Our mission is to provide a platform for open and honest conversations about spirituality and to inspire and empower our listeners to live their most authentic lives in good relation to each other's, the living and invisible worlds. I look forward to connecting with you again here or at our events, retreats, and online gatherings. You can find all our offerings at thesanctuaryheal.com. Once again, it is thesanctuaryheal.com.